Thank you, Robin. Very happy to be here. And I hope in the time I have with you today, I'll be able to give you a glimpse into compassionate inquiry. I think you all know a lot about breath work. I don't think I have much to teach you here. Compassionate inquiry is something that I merge into my work with clients in breathing or talking therapy sessions. So yeah, compassionate inquiry is an approach that was developed by Dr. Gabor Mate, who is, a famous trauma expert today, who's written great books, including When the Body Says No, and The Myth of Normal. So yeah, if you don't know about him, I'll invite you to check him out, check out his videos. So yeah, what does the compassionate inquiry approach entail? So as the name speaks for itself, compassion is a key element. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Then there's inquiry, meaning that compared with traditional talk therapy, the role of the therapist is more engaged. We ask questions, yeah. So we go on an inquiry. And it is a somatic approach, meaning that we're always checking in with the client's body as we go through the process. So first, I'd like to say a couple of things about compassion. So, in a session, there's going to be three sources of compassion. There's the therapist's compassion towards the client's own self-compassion, and the therapist's self-compassion towards themselves. So, of course, compassion sounds good to everybody. We believe we all need it. We would agree that as a therapist or as a sitter in a breathwork session, we need to be compassionate, right? But why is compassion actually crucial for healing, right? So, clients, people come to us because of some suffering that they have. They're in some kind of physical or psychic pain. And, as a therapist or sitter, we can't really make their pain go away, right? That's not really our job. What we can do is help the client see the truth of their experience, of their current situation, whichever they're coming to us with, and the truth of their childhoods, right? So I'd really like to, here quote A.H. Almas, a great teacher who's got a book called The Diamond Heart, where he says something beautiful about compassion, that it is a healing agent, which helps us to tolerate the hurt of seeing the truth. The function of compassion in the work is not to reduce the hurt, but it's to lead to the truth. The truth, much of the time, is painful or scary. And compassion is what makes it possible to tolerate that hurt and fear. And what he says is that, in fact, it is only when compassion is present that people will allow themselves to see the truth. So only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth. Where there is no compassion, there is no trust. Yeah. The author is A.H. Almas, A-L-M-A-A-S. So first, we bring our own compassion as the therapist, right? Or as the sitter in a breathwork session. And as you can imagine, a person wouldn't trust us if they perceived that they were being judged, right? Or they were being not understood. If we're not being compassionate towards them, instead of trust or truth, we're gonna, connect them to shame, for example, or fear. So being compassionate as the helper is key, right? And so, for example, we could, in a compassion inquiry session, the therapist can self-disclose, right? Not to make it about themselves, but to say, you know, I've experienced this. You're not alone in
folks
this.
on the flight deck. Yes, that's
Right. So we would say, you know, I've worked through this, whatever challenge they're going through, if you can relate. And that opens up a possibility for them that it's also possible for you. Right. So by showing compassion to the client, what we gradually want to do is to help the client connect to their own self-compassion. And this is key, right? So it's only when they can look at themselves, at their own experience through a self-compassionate lens is where the healing can happen. Yeah. So here I'd like to refer to another author that I've recently discovered, Kirsten Neff. She's done a lot of work on self-compassion. And you know what she's found, and I think we've all heard this before, that you know being self-compassionate can be perceived as weak, right? Oh, well, if we're you know quote unquote feeling sorry for ourselves, then it's a sign of weakness, or that we'll stagnate or not grow or not move forward, right? So she's done a lot of studies showing that this is not true. So she's tested it, for example, on high-level athletes. And what her research has shown is that self-compassion improved their performance and overall being, right? Overall well-being. And criticism, right, it can lead to some results, but those would be limited and short-term. So yeah, self-compassion is what really promotes the growth and healing. And for example, in CI, in compassion inquiry, we approach addiction from that perspective of compassion. Yeah. So if just right now, as a little example for yourself, if you can think of a habit or behavior or substance that you don't feel too good about, you know, it could be anything. For me, it could be, you know, being stuck on my phone and just scrolling and scrolling, for instance, or an extra coffee or so. So think of something that you're not too happy about that you do. Yeah. And now think about, what does this behavior or substance do for you? What does it provide? Yeah. So if I took my own example of getting stuck on my phone, I would say it calms me, it can soothe me, it can center me, it can maybe even distract me from my problems. Yeah. And now we can ask, you know, and whatever that is for you, is there anything wrong with wanting to feel those things? Is there anything wrong with wanting to feel calmer, more regulated, soothed? Yeah. Not really. So it's not so much the behavior, but what it is that it's giving to me, right? And that typically is not a problem, what it is that I want to get from it. And then I can ask myself, you know, what's another way that I could meet that need, right? I can maybe do some breathing if I notice that I'm feeling agitated and not calm, right? And this works with any even hard addictions, you know, even the person, I don't know, using heroin or such, what he's seeking is some form of relief. And when people see that all they're seeking is relief, that's where the compassion towards themselves can also come in. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel relief. And what's another way I could meet that need, right? And lastly, for compassion, there's the self-compassion of the therapist, right? So I was quite and many people were quite surprised when Gabor in our training said, well, I don't believe in such a thing as compassion fatigue. I think we often hear that term that, you know, we can burn out from, you know, helping people a lot and, you know, feeling too much compassion for other people. Well, it's not feeling compassion for others that can lead us to burnout or fatigue. What it is the lack of self-compassion that can lead to our burnout as helpers, sitters, right? So if we are seeing clients while we're too tired, while we're unwell, if we're not taking time off or doing else our self-care, then we're not being self-compassionate. Yeah. And in that way, what are we actually showing our clients if we can't, sort of practice what we preach and apply that to ourselves? If I don't allow it, then are you allowed to feel self-compassion? So yeah, it's self-care is really, really core when it comes to working with others in whatever approach. It's helpful for us, and it's really helpful for the people we work with, right? And yeah, the next element of the compassion inquiry that I'd like to talk about is the inquiry piece. Why is it an inquiry, right? So in a session, what we always start with is with an intention. We ask, what is it that you want to get from our time together? Yeah, we don't assume, right? If the client is coming to us, they're looking distressed. We don't assume, okay, that's what they want to go with, without asking. No, we always ask, what is it that you'd want to get out of this time together? And we can get in some really unexpected answers, right? And whatever that intention is going to be the contract, right? From the beginning to the end, this is going to be our northern light. Yeah. And the reason why we don't also presume what the person needs is because, well, if we presume, then that will replicate potentially an experience they had in childhood, where adults presumed that this is what they needed without asking. Yeah. So we want the person we're working with to really have agency in what it is they want to get out of working with us. And we really need to check in with ourselves to not have an agenda, what I want this client to achieve, right? We want to make sure that we're not fixing, we're not rescuing, we're not getting them to feel a particular feeling or make a specific change, right? If a person comes to us with a relationship problem and we in our own mind have made a set like, okay, they really need to separate, then we have an agenda and we need to work with that and have the client make really their own decision without us sort of navigating them towards what we think is right for them, right? Because if we do, if what's the problem with having an agenda? Well, because then it really becomes about us as the helper, right? It means that, we want to feel like, I want to feel like I'm doing a good job, right? If the client has, left the abusive partner, if the client has gotten the job, well, their progress becomes about me. It becomes, I make them satisfy my needs, right? My needs to say I'm a good therapist, I've done a good job, right? And again, if we do that, that can reproduce what happened to them as children, where, the source of my feeling good about me becomes them, right? And if we do that, we'll be either met with compliance, right? Clients who want to please the parent, or resistance. Yeah. All I can do is sort of push back and say no, and neither are helpful. My first career is actually in law. I've been doing disputes for over a decade, right? And so, asking questions really came naturally to me. I really love that, that engagement with people. But I really need to make sure that I don't get into cross-examination mode where I'm like, okay, and you said this, and how is that true, and such and such, and like in law, in a courtroom, what we're always taught as young lawyers is never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Yeah. Well, here it's the complete opposite. If we're expecting a particular answer from a client, and we're not asking it from a place of curiosity, then it means we have an agenda. Yeah. So we really need to check and get back to our center, to our place of curiosity and intuition, and having the client lead, right? So I guess a few words about intention. And I think we also, we would also do that in a breathwork session, we really want to get clear on that. What is it that the client wants? And sometimes they may say, oh, I'm angry, I had a fight with my wife. Yeah. Is that an intention? Not really. This is their current situation. You're angry, you had a fight. So then we need to dig deeper. Well, what is it about your anger or the fight that you'd like to look at? Yeah. If something could be different by the end of the session, what would it be? Yeah. Let's imagine they'd say, well, I want to understand, what is it that makes me so angry? Yeah. That's already a good starting point. And we can even dig deeper. What is it about understanding what will understanding your anger give you? What will that do for you if you understand it? Yeah. Then again, we might get more gold. They might say, well, I may notice, what triggers me in the future, and that will allow me to be more present, and I'll, not hurt my relationship. So, really establishing what it is that we're going for that will leave the client with, a more opening, more freedom, more space. Yeah. And once we have that contract, what it is that we're looking at, so for example, the root of the anger, it's now our responsibility as the helper to stick with it. Yeah. So the client can go in their mind and they can go into talking about the million ways that their wife makes them angry and what she does and what she says and how is da 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 da, right? That can go a while. In CI, which again is maybe not very traditional, we interrupt, and we, with permission from the client, but we say, in the session, I may interrupt you. When we notice that a person is going into their mind and they're telling the same story that they've told themselves, that they've told their friends, that they've going over and over, yeah, we might interrupt and invite them to come back to the present, to their body. Yeah. Because it's not in that continuous storytelling that we're going to get some kind of resolution. Yeah. So with the purpose of the interruption, we're going to bring them back to the present moment and continue exploring the intention. Yeah. And by the end of the session, we might check in, has anything come to light with your question? Is there anything you can take away? But again, we always want to make sure that the person we're working with knows that there is no expectation. And we got to be totally fine if they say, well, no, I didn't get anything out of it, or, and trust that maybe something will emerge for them as we continue working together. Yeah. So, I realize I don't have that much time. I really wanted to cover the one really key point of CI, and that is the body, right? Why is it important to always come back to the body? Breathwork is inherently somatic, of course. We're letting the body speak. But I think it's important to understand, why is the body so key? Yeah. So the body is actually the only thing that is ever in the present moment. Yeah. Our mind, if we notice, it's either in the past or in the future. Yeah. But the body is what's right here, right now. Yeah. There can be a tension here, a fluttering in the belly, in the shoulders, a clenched jaw. This is what's happening in the moment. Yeah. So the mind is the one that tells the stories, it interprets, but the body is what speaks the truth. Yeah. So because CI is a trauma-informed approach, we often go back in time to find the source of the suffering, the thing that happened to us when we were children that shouldn't have happened. Well, the way we go there in CI is through the body. Yeah. And the only way we can really deal with trauma, which actually shows up as this accumulation of tension in the body, is right now in the present moment. We can only deal with it now because the body is here and the healing happens now. And that's where the real change happens, right? So by inviting the client to check in, what is it that you're feeling in the body? And they might say, oh, as I talk about, being afraid of my father when I was a child, when he was unkind to me, we, with compassion, will invite to stay with that sensation, with that experience of fear in the body which got repressed. And sometimes, they might say, oh, if I stay with this will last forever, and it's so intense. And what I've seen time and time again, that by bringing presence and by bringing compassion, that difficult experience will only last a few seconds, will only last a minute or so. Yeah. And by being able to stay with it is what will help us work through it and release it from the body. Yeah. So I only have 4 minutes left. I can keep on talking and talking about this. I don't know if there's any questions, which I'd be happy to answer.
I can have a question. In your in your sessions, is not in the same session, but let's say you have an inquiry, a compassion inquiry session, and that person in your thought, you can say, this might need a breathing session, or it might need an exercise, or it might need that book. So do you recommend them things to do aside, or it's only the compassion inquiry sessions?
Yeah, no, I definitely recommend other things because, compassion inquiry isn't really a standalone practice, and we merge, other things that we do. And I kind of tell my clients that this is what I know how to do. We can do compassion inquiry where we just talk, or we can do breathing. And what I've noticed is that after a while, when a client has gotten comfortable with me just sitting and having a conversation, they might say, yeah, I want to check out that breathwork thing you do. Yeah. And sometimes I might suggest it a little bit more with clients who are really, really in their mind. Yeah. And they find it really difficult to go into the body. And there's a lot of rationalizing and there's a lot of story. Yeah. Which, compassionately I understand because they've had the experience of the body not being safe. But if there's already that level of trust between me and the person, they might agree to lie down and close their eyes for an hour or however long, and to breathe. And I've noticed that it has been really, really powerful, merging the two approaches, for sure. Yeah, where, in a breathing session, there's not really so much need for words. There's purely that experience. Yeah.